So my name is Richie Wong. I own Functional Strength. I own a gym and I am a coach for Olympic Weightlifting New Zealand. I was born in Palmerston North and I moved up to Auckland probably about 10 years ago, or actually probably about 12 to 13 years ago, and started off personal training, studied physio for a couple of years, decided that physio was not for me, personal trained, and then fell in love with the sport of weightlifting. So started off with martial arts at a young age, worked up quite high in martial arts, decided that I wanted to play other sports, played golf through high school, played to about a 3 handicap, so it was pretty decent with the old golf clubs. Continued on from there, started playing rugby, played Takapuna under 19s when I moved up to study physio, then went into personal training, and then decided I wanted to fight MMA, so started training MMA, trained kickboxing for about 5 years, trained jiu-jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 5 years as well, did some Greco-Roman wrestling, and then as a part of S&C for MMA, I decided that I was going to start doing some CrossFit. So my coach at the time coached CrossFit as well, so used that as a strength and conditioning tool, and then after competing at CrossFit, I sort of moved more into weightlifting because that's what I really enjoyed, and I have competed in weightlifting for about 6 years now, not in the last couple of years because I've been coaching a lot more, and so that's sort of my journey to where I sort of am now. The biggest part for me is I am one of those guys that I was always good at a lot of sports. Whatever I sort of put my hand to, I became reasonably good at or became quite good at, but it never really sort of deep down inside fulfilled how I felt about a sport, and I could take or leave any sort of sport that I sort of came to. With weightlifting, that was sort of very different in terms of enjoyment and what I actually got out of it, and in terms of where I am today and what I enjoy doing, and in terms of coaching. I think sort of success is based on an individual and what an individual sort of sees success as. For me, I see success as when I'm coaching and sort of seeing light bulb moments when you try to educate people on how their body should move and technique and bits and pieces like that, and when you see them really understand and you see them click, I think that's what success is sort of defined to me as currently, because that's my passion, sort of coaching. Sort of what got tough, or what I see as sort of something that's really made things tough for a lot of people, is the ability to sort of be. I was always pretty fortunate that I had no barrier in terms of my parents were always super encouraging when it came to sport and bits and pieces like that. But for me, what I always saw as barrier is the ability to not be able to have your mates turn up and play and enjoy and do what you all actually enjoyed, and them having that barrier of trying to get together to try and, their parents obviously weren't as much into them being so social or playing sport or whatever it may be. So for me, in terms of memorable moments, Not in terms of my own sporting, because like I said, I was sort of not really fulfilled by actually playing a lot of sports. Back in the day, I just played it because I was good at it. But there is a lot of fulfillment sort of in this coaching realm, and that's something that I really enjoy. But yeah. I think the biggest part about coaching is, like there's a lot of different philosophies out there, and there's a lot of people out there with different sort of thought processes when it comes to coaching and when it comes to sort of sport in general. I know that it's sort of like a huge driver for a lot of people, which is huge. It's a mode of transport, and it really does bring out the best in people. But for me, I think, how do I say it? It's just one of those things where, for me, the education piece when it comes to sport is huge. Like understanding that obviously there's no point in reinventing the wheel when it comes to sports like golf or whatever it may be. There's a way and a proven method, but sort of understanding as to reasons as to why we do it. So if we talk a lot about the difference between coaching boys and coaching girls, a lot of boys, you just tell them to do it, and there's no question as to why we do it. It's just, okay, I've been told I need to do this, let's go ahead and do it. Whereas with ladies, a lot more, there's a lot of why do we do this, why that, and answering those questions sort of, and seeing those moments where they understand. That's, yeah. So I coach CrossFit, obviously. CrossFit is obviously made up of weightlifting, monostructural, and gymnastics, which is cool. It's always been a huge passion for me, coaching CrossFit, and that sort of led on to me being able to be mentored by one of New Zealand's best weightlifters and weightlifting coaches around, Richie. He sort of gave me an opportunity when I was about, it would be pretty close to 9 years ago, and he gave me the opportunity to learn from him, to be mentored by him, and where that sort of sparked passion is for weightlifting. So coaching weightlifting sort of at a youth age, up to a senior age, through to masters, and at various levels, so from beginner all the way through to international. So yeah. Working with the community is a huge passion of mine. We see a lot of ACC statistics, obviously, with regards to injuries, and we look at one of the biggest things that can reduce that is education. So when kids grow up, you see that their bodies don't really match their movement, and it's a huge thing when they grow, because the more we can get their body awareness up and match the two together, the safer they're going to be. So for me, it's more about movement competencies and teaching kids the basics, and teaching them the basics well, getting them to understand that what they do now and what they learn now can directly affect what's down the track. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's super important to me because I've got children. I've got 2 girls and a son, and it's one of those things where, I never got taught basic movement competencies when I was younger. I've just been pretty fortunate that my body awareness is pretty decent, and that I've gone through life like that. But the more I look at things, the more I want my kids to have a good foundation, and also to sort of have a good quality life where we only get one body, and injuries, etc., directly impact how we are later on in life. So if we can reduce those numbers, we can avoid accidents, we can avoid injuries, then we're heading in the right direction.
You're going right now.
Yeah, I think a lot more now in this day and age, there's a lot more ability to be able to search online, go on Google and all those sorts of tools, which back when I was growing up obviously wasn't so readily available. And there's a lot of literature that's sort of changed over the years. Like back in the day, it used to be, knees can't track over toes. It's not good for you. All that sort of stuff. That training for young children isn't great, and there's a lot of different literature out there to say otherwise. And that's goes back to sort of the questions about weightlifting and whether kids should weightlift, and all sorts of bits and pieces like that. So, yeah. I think one of the biggest things is being challenged to think on my own and think about things, and just, I think that's where the real growth has come from, and having a mentor who has always challenged you to go, okay, where are you at? What are you thinking about? Where could you be? What sort of legacy? I think legacy is a massive term in which we always spoke about, and that's what would you do to leave? If you were to die tomorrow, what would you be remembered for? What would you have done to make a huge change? And I think that's always stuck really big with me, is the legacy component, and in terms of doing something to make a change rather than just plodding along like nothing's wrong, or not that it doesn't have to be that something's wrong, but where can we make a change? What can we do for other people? And yeah, that legacy piece. It's an interesting one. We talk a lot about legacy, but for me, I don't really feel like it needs for me to be remembered for anything. I think more or less I'm keen to make change, I'm keen to help make change, and I'm keen to be there at whatever level it may be to help grow sport, grow passion, and so many other variables. It doesn't really always have to be about one individual and what you leave behind, sort of thing. Yeah, I think that sport has sort of really impacted me in a way where it's made me much more understanding. I think if I wasn't a coach, I don't think I would be at sort of the place where I am now, where you have to understand a lot about dynamics, a lot about different people's personalities, a lot about just empathy, a lot of different bits. There's a lot of different variables that coaching teaches you, and I think if I wasn't involved in sport and I didn't end up where I am now, I don't think I would sort of be the same person that I have sort of grown to be. But yeah, there's just a few key things in which sport really can teach you, and being a coach teaches you. I think my role as a coach, it can be there can be a lot that's involved. You can wear so many different hats as a coach. You have to be somebody who's empathetic, somebody who, if somebody has a concern, they voice it, they come to you. You have to be a person that's passionate. There's so many different facets to sport that so much of it we can get caught up in trying to wear too many hats, and more or less for me it's more or less trying to develop to create the best team possible. So for me, I can do the nutrition thing, but I choose not to do the nutrition thing. There's so many different variables that we as a coach control, or we can control, and I think as a coach, sometimes we can do too much for an athlete, and sometimes we're too quick to give them the answers. So there's so many different bits and pieces that we as a coach have to deal with. But yeah. It was always good, like for me it's becoming like, if you go to Palmerston North now, it's starting to shift a little bit more. But yeah, for me it was always good. I went to an all-boys school, all-boys high school, and yeah, I just was one of the lads, really just fit in and just nobody really made it a massive issue, and no, it was cool. It's good. And I think that's the advantage of coming from a small town, where everybody knows everybody, and yeah. I think the biggest part about connecting with my roots is the fact that on my dad's side, we have a family reunion every 5 years. So it was always important that, to get back to the family roots, everybody meet together. Although it was in Fiji, just seeing the diversity of family and also just the growth of family and just the ability to see where everybody has come from and where everybody sort of is now, it's been a huge thing and always has been. And that's why my heritage-wise, we sort of are more towards my dad's side of the family, is because there's so much passion and growth coming from that side, and everybody celebrates that. So, yeah. Yeah, so my home was more of a westernised home. Sort of like when I was younger, my grandmother on my mum's side was here. She used to speak to us in Chinese all the time. But when I got to about 5 years old, she went back to China. So she's pretty close to 100 now, and I haven't seen her in probably, I would say, close to 10 years. So once sort of she stopped speaking Chinese to us, we really didn't speak a lot of Chinese, and so very European, spoke English, yeah, so. Sort of, I think where I was 10 years ago to where I am sort of now, I was pretty, obviously 10 years ago, I was pretty young in terms of just sort of getting out of, just deciding sort of what I wanted to do in life. And I didn't even really know what I wanted to do in life, and sort of this 10-year period I've grown by doing various bits and pieces which weren't sport orientated or weren't sport driven, that sort of started to build who I am today, and has certainly sort of helped pave that pathway for where I am now. Like, if I look at it, I'm probably much like my dad. I'm pretty proud of my heritage, and in terms of, like, where I am today is sort of defined a lot by sort of the way in him and the way in which my grandfather sort of paved the way for us to move over to New Zealand from Fiji, and yeah, so it's sort of made me appreciate and made me go, actually, I want to better my life for my kids, and that's why I'm so big on this sort of education piece and trying to educate them and trying to help out with everybody else and trying to help so people don't end up in situations that my family came from, So. I think a lot of the time, from what I see, I speak a lot with certain people about, like, when they're coming into the gym or when I'm interacting in everyday life or catch up with some friends or whatever, and I'm meeting new people. I think the biggest part for me is asking, so what are you up to? What are you doing? What are you studying? and then seeing what their answer or reaction is. A lot of people will say, I'm doing a Bachelor of Sport and Health, or I'm doing, like health and fitness. My first question to them is always, what do you hope to do with it? Like seeing if somebody knows or if somebody doesn't know, you've really got to sort of challenge them to go, well, are you doing it for the sake of just doing it? Or are you doing it for the sake of just because you finished school, you don't know what to do, so you feel like you should go out and study, and this is the easiest thing that you can study, or this is, or you've always been good at sport, so is this what you want to do? I think the biggest part is challenging them, and I often get the answer, well, I don't actually know what I want to do once I've finished my degree, you know what I mean? So I think the biggest part is it's okay not to know, but in terms of you can sort of see somebody's personality come out when they're answering the question, and you can sort of make some assumptions as to how it's going to go if they decide to stick in that sort of field in which they're planning to study. So I think the biggest part is sort of, for me, if I had a gap year, I probably wouldn't have studied physio for 2 years, but if I look back at it, it's sort of made me the person that I am today. A lot of the stuff I learned in those first 2 years I applied to what I do in personal training, like in applying to movement. So I think you can't really say that somebody's wrong when they're just going, okay, I'm studying this. But I think challenging them to understand that they need to have some sort of goal, or understand that they're not just doing a degree for the sake of doing a degree. Does that make sense? So for me, I think learning and having a great mentor, that really made a huge difference in my life, and with where I was heading. I had a few job offers to co-own facilities early on into when I started working for my mentor. But for me personally, I made the decision that that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay, I wanted to learn, and now I own the business. But I think for me, that's why I got given an opportunity when I was younger, to be taken in, to be mentored, to understand how business runs, to do so many different things that I've just done the same thing right now. So I've just taken on a young man who I identified a year ago who was going to be a great coach, who understands movement really well, who's just finished a sporting degree, and so I pulled him from Palmerston North, and he now works for me. So it's now, I was given an opportunity to do something and to learn, and now it's my turn to give back to somebody else. So I think learning and having the ability to be mentored, that's a huge part. I don't know, like, if I would change anything, because obviously without encountering what you have done, you know, like, you wouldn't be where you are today, sort of thing, you know, like, you only pick up the certain bits and pieces along the way if you experience them. So I think I've always sort of been relaxed and always thought that good things come to those who wait and those who, you know, like, and those who give, like in a typical sort of Chinese sense, where they believe that if you give, you get back tenfold, sort of thing. So I think that if I was to say anything to myself, is just give, like, yeah. I think be open to learning is a huge one. I also think that attitude is a big one. For me, I think that if you, in this day and age, if you have a great attitude, you can be taught anything. Anybody can teach you anything. You are much more employable if you have a good attitude, because you can be taught the rest. I think that's where we sort of fall over a little bit in this day and age, is people's attitudes towards learning and towards working. I think the biggest part would be open, and that's one of the big things, is have a good attitude.